Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to start the day off right. We have with us, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Robert Sikes.
Good morning. I'm going to kind of talk more experience-based than science-based because this is kind of about my life and my transition to keto, using it from a bodybuilding perspective. So we'll go with that. And nobody knows my life better than me, so hopefully I don't mess up. Um, First of all, I want to start this with some gratitude. It's like the coolest thing ever to be surrounded by all of y'all in the keto community, which is a very tight-knit, positive community. And there's so many sub-niches within this community, and like the excitement and the knowledge that y'all bring, I'm just humbled to be here. So, I'm going to give you some backstory, kind of talk about the transition, because I think that's relevant. So we'll just start from the beginning. Maybe. All right. So, when I started training to be a bodybuilder when I was about 17 years old, and you always hear about genetics in the sport of bodybuilding, and I just want to assure you that I was blessed with genetics. I mean, look at this picture right here. Oh. All right, so I was 17 years old, 115 pounds, and I was the future Mr. Olympian, I can assure you. And I was training, in my dad's garage with like pieces of steel he had laying around, not really knowing what I was doing. But I was convinced that this is the calling in my life. And, as a new upcoming lifter, you're always keen to, pick apart the brain of more experienced lifters, what they know, what knowledge can I glean. And the bro community in competitive bodybuilding is very strong, and the knowledge oftentimes is not so strong. So there was quite a transition phase. So I started at 115 pounds, and everybody was telling me, I gotta eat, I gotta eat, I gotta eat. So that's what I did. I ate, and I got up to 230 pounds. I was eating about 6,000 calories a day, most of which was, cheap, terrible carbs. I mean, those XX large chimichangas, they're 800 calories a piece. And I was going through more than one a day. I don't think I pushed the button here. Anyways, I was 230 pounds, about 28% body fat, and I was just completely unhealthy. It was an unhealthy approach to that lifestyle, to bodybuilding, but that's the norm, and that's what was sad about it, is because people would have like the bulking season and the cutting phase, and they'd bulk up to this incredible weight, totally unhealthy, have like no cardiovascular strength whatsoever. They'd be, 25, 30+% body fat. What is going on? Do I have to point this somewhere? And I don't need like a manual keyboard here. All right, we're going the wrong way. All right, maybe here. I don't think I turned it off.
Give us next slide until we fix it.
Okay, perfect. Next slide. Next. All right, so anyways, I was 230 pounds, and then I was going to do a competition. So I cut down, in 3 months, I lost 70 pounds. And I bulked up to 230, thinking that I was going to compete on stage at 200. Like, that was my goal. It just sounded good. 200 pounds on stage, that sounds impressive. And I got leaner and leaner and leaner, and I didn't realize how much fat that I had on my body. And I didn't stop cutting until I was 153 pounds. So I went from 230 to like 153 in 3 months. And I mean, hours of cardio, just totally depriving myself from a calorie standpoint. I was starving myself. I mean, my hair would fall out, like it was not healthy. And the sad thing is this is just the norm in this industry, in this sport. And people just don't know the healthy way to go about it. And I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. So I developed eating disorders through that. You deprive yourself for so long, for 3, 4, 5 months, at zero, like next to nothing on the macronutrient profile, And then after that show is over, you go out and you develop eating disorders. You know, you binge and then you feel bad because you're binging, so you purge. It's just not a healthy lifestyle. So next slide. I really got to thinking, what can I do differently? Because this isn't sustainable. I can't live my life like this. I'm going to kill myself. I mean, at this point, I just graduated college and moved up to Washington. I competed in 2 shows there and did well, but I followed, the conventional bodybuilding bro type diet, and continued to learn, continued to grow, but I knew something was off. At this time, I was also kind of playing around with different dieting protocols. Typical dieting protocols for bodybuilders is they'll have incredibly high protein and then moderately high carbs, and then they'll have like no fat, totally opposite of keto. And then they'll taper those carbs up until show day, but they'll leave protein incredibly high, like 300 grams of protein in a day is pretty typical. Go ahead and do the next slide. So I got to, I don't know if y'all are familiar with John Kiefer. He developed a program called Backloading. Basically, the concept with that is you would do keto throughout the first half of the day, and then right before you go to sleep, you would have a large bolus of high glycemic index carbs that was designed to spike your insulin, and then that would fuel the next day's training session. So I did that for quite a while, enjoyed it because I didn't put on too much body fat, and I could just really splurge and eat, donuts and cereal, Cocoa Pebbles, and I do miss me some Cocoa Pebbles. But it was like, I'd eat all these because for it to work, you have to have the high glycemic index carbs, so it really was crap carbs. And I'm like, this is working in the sense that I'm not getting that much body fat, but I mean, honestly, this cannot be healthy. I just kind of like started second guessing myself. So I noticed that I would feel the best in the early part of the day when I was, no carbs and like keto. So I got to, that's kind of how I discovered what keto was, and I really started doing some research. And there wasn't anybody doing keto in my niche, in bodybuilding. So I kind of went against the grain and just said, I'm just going to cut out carbs completely and see what happens. And that's when I, found keto. And then I made the brand Keto Savage years after that, because it's like, this is what I asked myself, what can I do to add the most value to others? And for me, this was it, like a light, it's like lifestyle performance, keto, living a healthy, sustainable life while improving aesthetics and performance. And for me, bodybuilding, it goes over into all facets of life. It's improved my relationships, my business endeavors, everything. Every skill that I've learned in bodybuilding has improved my skills in life. So this was my brand. This is what I wanted to do to add value to others. So I developed Keto Savage. Next slide, please. So I was thinking, I did keto for about 2 years in the off season. I was putting on some pretty good muscle, but I never competed, following the ketogenic protocol. I couldn't find any other competitor that's ever done that, so I was in uncharted waters, and I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if I would be able to maintain muscle. I didn't know. I mean, there was no literature in my community that I could turn to know. So I just let's just run an experiment, and we'll just compete on keto. Because you would hear some people, trying keto, and then they would cycle it in and out, and they'd feel bad. It's like, rather than doing all that crazy stuff, I'm just going to stick to what I know makes me feel good and just see what happens. So decided I'd do a competition, following the ketogenic protocol throughout my off season, my contest prep, my peak week, and post show. So this is just a slide that kind of illustrates. This was, I believe, a week before my show. My show was on the 15th, so a couple days prior to. At this point, I was about 3.5% body fat and 157 pounds. So my calories were at about 1,700 calories, almost 1,693. It's taking about 140 grams of fat, 25 grams total carbs, and protein was down to 67. At one point, I hit 65. And to kind of compare this with conventional bodybuilding dieting at the time, I would tell people what my macros were, and they would look at me like, you're not gonna, like when I started my prep, they're like, you're gonna fail, you're not gonna make it. You're not gonna show up on show day, you're gonna die, you're gonna lose all your muscle. Like, I heard everything. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll die trying, It's interesting because all of the other bodybuilders, with the really high protein, there were some that their fat would get down to 25, 30 grams as a 190-pound bodybuilder with 20 to 30 grams of fat. They would cut out fish oil pills to save on their fat grams. And it was just unhealthy. Like, the science didn't make sense in my head. It's like, if you're, that lean and you need to fuel yourself, the dots just weren't adding up. So, interestingly enough, the prep went on, and this little break here, I was traveling there. I didn't get off the diet, just little caveat there. I noticed my weight would decrease, but my strength didn't decrease at all until like the last few weeks. And most bodybuilders in a prep, they start on a caloric deficit, and their strength decreases, they lose muscle. I mean, when you compete, your focus transitions from building muscle to just maintaining as much muscle as possible. And you're not trying to build muscle in a prep because you're at a caloric deficit. So keto, for me, I was able to retain and sustain more muscle mass than the other competitors. And an interesting perspective is when they would cut their calories and get closer to show day, they would get more and more irritable. They're like brain fog like crazy. I mean, the first 4 shows that I did when I was not keto, like, you just didn't want to be around me. I mean, I was a nightmare. And I'm still kind of bad. I mean, Crystal will tell you, I'm not really fun to be around. But, so I did this, and I would feel better and better and better. I'd have more and more mental clarity the leaner I got. Because the leaner I got, the lower my protein got, the higher my blood ketones got. I would feel more focused, I actually PR'd in the gym. My lifts were going up when everybody else's were going down. They get more and more irritable. They were losing muscle mass. I was feeling better, and I was building muscle mass. Like, I kind of started to get a little bit more confident there about midway through. And then on show day, well, go ahead and do the next slide. I'm going to play a quick little clip of some competition footage. So if you would go ahead and cue that.
My goodness, my golly, give it up for these guys getting the workout of their lifetime. I got out of breath just watching them. Holy smokes. That was a workout. One more time for all these guys. In first place, the men's overall classic bodybuilding champion. Put your hands together for Robert Orion Sikes and our newest GVO Pro. Congratulations, Robert. One more time, I can't stress enough. Let's give all these guys a round of applause. That was amazing. I got a cramp just watching them.
I got a sword. I always wanted a sword. But yeah, that was, I wanted to share that. Thank you. I appreciate that. That was like a really monumental moment in my life, because I was able to get a pro card status following a diet that I believed in when nobody else believed in it. And I learned so much. I mean, it was a life-changing moment for me. And on show day, I kind of want to talk a little bit about peak week, because peak week is a really important critical time block for competitors, because you do all the work pre-show for the 3, 4, 5 months you're prepping, and then peak week you have to kind of manipulate a few minor details to really bring that out on stage. So most competitors, they'll like water load a few days prior to, and then they'll cut all their water completely, and then the day of they'll have like 20 ounces maybe, and you get incredibly dehydrated. One of the competitors here had to walk off stage because his chest was cramping so bad he couldn't even do the posing. And right before I stepped on stage, I had like 1.5 gallons of water, But since you're not on carbs, you don't have that glycogen, you're not holding any water weight. So I was drinking 2 gallons of water a day, being much more healthy about it, 150 grams of fat, and they're like depleting everything. They're like literally killing themselves. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. And that's why I want my voice to shine here, like in the community of bodybuilding, because I think of all the athletic genres within the keto community, it's really strong in the endurance. It's gaining in popularity, like CrossFit. But bodybuilders are so anti-keto because they're just, the stigma of carbs for muscle growth is so strong. They're not willing to open their minds to a different possibility. So I really want to showcase that here. Go ahead and do the next slide. We can watch me again, that's okay too. But so the outcome, yeah, I earned my pro card naturally. I didn't have any muscle loss, sustainable dieting, and the main thing I want to talk about is post-show. So I kind of talked about that. So go ahead and do the next slide. So post-show, from a competitor standpoint, they get down, I kind of touched on this earlier, they get down really low on their calories, then they'll go out and binge. And it's called a post-show rebound. My first show, that one I did in 2012, I was down super low, lost to 70 pounds in 3 months, and then 2 days after the show, I was 20 pounds up in 2 days, and it wasn't like just water weight. A lot of it was water weight, but I mean, so much that it's fat. Like your body's a sponge that week of competition because you've depleted yourself so much that every and anything you put into your body, it's going to hold. It's going to be a sponge. And then, you're going to have that post-competition rebound, gain that weight. A lot of it's going to be body fat. And then that's where these competitors, they'll have these eating disorders established because they've worked so hard for something. They get super lean, and then it's all like out the window, They wake up the next morning, look in the mirror, they have like fat cheeks again, and like that's not cool, So it really messes with your head. So I thought to myself, what can I do to kind of test the keto post-show? So I don't know if you're familiar with Jason Whitrock, but he's got a YouTube video series. Yeah, he's got pretty good content. And he did a 21-day 4,000 calorie challenge in which he would eat 4,000 calories keto for 21 days, documented his body fat pre and post challenge, and I don't think he did his blood work, but so I saw that YouTube series, and I found it like the last week of my prep. So I was watching that as I was prepping. Like I was on the Stairmaster watching him eat 4,000 calories, and I'm like, I'm gonna do this, And so I decided to do that, and I was at 1,600 calories towards the end there, so I more than doubled my macros, and I was really curious to see if I would have a negative impact on my body fat. What could be a more sustainable approach for other competitors post-show? I had minimal rebound, very minimal. I didn't have hardly any weight gain immediately after the show. Throughout the entire 21 days, which I continued for a full 2 months, I only gained 8 pounds of body weight. My body fat was a 1.2% increase, which is very, very, very nominal compared to most other competitors. I got my blood work done on January 20th and on the 5th of May. My HDL went up, my LDL went down dramatically, and my triglycerides were basically cut in half. So post-show, more than doubling my macros, all of my biomarkers improved. And I got to eat a lot of food, and it was really cool. Go ahead and do the next slide. That's pretty much it, so right on time there. Thank you. I guess we can do Q&A now. If anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer some. Try to anyways. Looks like we got a taker. What you got, man?
Hey, Robert. Thank you very much, first of all.
Absolutely.
And I'm not into bodybuilding yet, anyways. I'm still pretty new to the whole keto thing, but I'm really enjoying the journey. And I'm wondering, like, it's clear that you have two separate goals, like you have a building period and then you have a cutting period. And I'm wondering if that's necessary or if there's kind of a middle ground approach where you can simultaneously do both. Like if somebody wants to, cut some of their body fat and also build a little muscle, is there, sort of a macro approach to achieving both goals simultaneously?
Great question. So it's hard to build muscle, maximize muscle growth while also maximizing fat loss. Like it's kind of hard to find that middle ground. I recommend you kind of really have one primary focus, then anything that happens to the other is just a bonus. That said, with conventional dieting, it's like huge peaks and valleys. Like you're either bulking or you're cutting. I think with keto, you can have a much more conservative approach and like have a calorie. I mean, you have to have a calorie surplus to be able to put on muscle at the rate that you really want. If that's what you're trying to maximize. So I would recommend finding a healthy, sustainable approach that's a surplus that allows you to build, if that is your primary goal, or if your goal is to cut, then have a sustainable caloric deficit. However, with keto, like in the off season, with the conventional dieting, you're gonna have the crazy peaks and valleys, like I said, and people will put on a lot more weight, more quickly than on keto, but a lot of that's gonna be fat weight, and a lot of it's gonna be water weight. With keto, I found that you can bulk and have a successful off season, but the weight you put on, while much less, is a much more quality weight, a lot more sustainable muscle, quality muscle. So it's a much better approach year round than conventional methods, in my opinion.
Right on. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Morning, Robert. I was going to ask the same question, so I've got another 20, so I'll just ask one. So my question would be, in your shredding cycle, what's your view on supplements, and which ones would you recommend, and what are the benefits of each one?
What was the question again?
Which supplements would you use in your keto shredding cycles? Which ones would you recommend, and what are the benefits of each?
My supplementation was drastically cut in half since adopting the ketogenic lifestyle. Pretty much the only thing I take, and I took this year round, was just a simple unflavored unsweetened creatine monohydrate, and then a simple unflavored unsweetened branched chain amino acid. And then I would, if you had $20 to spend, everyone wants to buy supplements. If you had $20 to spend, go buy a thing of like coconut oil, not necessarily supplements. But yeah, so like, make sure your electrolytes are good, sodium, potassium, magnesium. If your electrolytes are good, you're hydrated, you've got a creatine and branch chain, then you're solid. That's all you need, man.
Okay. And what's your view on exogenous ketones?
Exogenous ketones. I didn't honestly experiment too much with that during this, but I've been adapted for about 3 years now. So all mine's through nutritional ketosis alone. I am keen to try some exogenous ketones just to kind of see how they impact me. I haven't really done it enough throughout my training to really know one way or the other how my training's impacted.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, great presentation.
Thanks, sir.
What was the process that led you to get down to 65 grams of protein? That seemed like it was pretty risky almost to me.
I'm glad you asked that. I meant to kind of cover that in more detail. I got 3 minutes, so we're good. I got 7 minutes. Okay, we're great. So basically, like most competitors, like I said, they'll leave protein really high, and they'll taper their carbs, or the fat will be gone. They'll taper their carbs, and they give themselves like a carb refeed, which is just basically a huge carb surplus throughout certain times in their prep. For me, the strategy I had was, okay, I'm in a ketogenic state. I'm keto adapted. My energy, my strength, my life source is my fat. That's the last thing I want to taper. So I'm going to leave that pretty high. I'm going to manipulate protein. Because like I said, when you switch over into a cutting phase, the goal is no longer to build muscle. I had no intentions of building muscle throughout my prep. If I did, great, but I wasn't really trying to. So my main goal was to maintain muscle. Ketones are incredibly muscle sparing. So I didn't really worry about losing muscle if my ketones were high. So by having my fat high, I would taper my fat a little bit. I think I started at about 240 grams of fat, and then I wound up at like the 150. But the main variable that I manipulated was the protein. So I would drop that down. And that's another crazy thing. When you tell bodybuilders in prep who are like, spiking theirs way up, I'm like, yeah, I'm at 65 grams of protein. They're like, yeah, I'm at 300, Who's going to win this race? And I won the race on the higher fat.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Think we're good? Oh, we got one more. What you got?
Sorry for the late
No, you're good.
arrival, but could you take us through like a little day of what meals you would eat, like snack foods or
During my prep?
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's kind of another laughable point. Everybody, they're eating like rice cakes and like chicken and broccoli. I literally had, and this was a bragging point for sure, every single day of my prep, I had bacon and eggs, and I had keto pizza every single day. You know, I mean, so yeah, body by fat, I guess, you know. I think we're good. Unless anybody good on time.